Release the Kraken!
Welcome back, fellow game designers. Ron here at Lame Duck Studios. In the previous tutorial, I went ahead and set up the controller so that we can have some basic input. So, of course, the mouse works, and of course, I can move the gamepad and the analog stick, and I can also move the keyboard arrow keys. But WASD, they do not work yet. Also, the other buttons on the controller have no results, so we want to go ahead and set those up. And also make some cleanup. So if you take a look at our widgets here, and actually let's go ahead and just do this real quick just to show you. I didn't show you last time, so let's go ahead and open up the widget. I'm going to go ahead and just break the output here. So right here, let's go ahead and break that. And just to make it easier to see, let's change the size of our size box. Let's make these 200 by 200. And then I'll do the other one for 200 by 200 as well. So now I have two buttons, and if I bring this up, you can kind of see them there. And if I move or select a button, you can kind of see this dotted outline. And actually, it'll be a lot easier if I just turn these to hidden. All the time. Here, let's just do this, and I'll move this to hidden. Okay, so now maybe you can quite see, but there's a little dotted line along the edge of this. And that's not really what we want. It's really hard to see as it is. But to get rid of that, we want to go up into our project settings. So edits, project settings. And we're going to look for the focus rule. So focus rule, render focus rule, that's what it is. And right now it's navigation only. We just turn that off to say never. And now if we go back in and I'm moving my arrow keys, don't see that little border, which is great. So go ahead and plug these back in. So now that our selection does its job. All right, so now to set up our buttons, we actually need to set up a couple things. First is the inputs we're going to use. So let's go back to Edit and Project Settings. Now you can use the default keybinds that are already there, such as Gamepad, left, right, and all that stuff. But I find it easier to kind of lump all that functionality into single inputs. So if we come down to inputs here, we're going to use action mappings. And I try to use action mapping specific for my UI. So I'm going to go ahead and make 4 of these. For up, down, left, and right, and actually I'll make one more for the actual button for selecting things. So let's do, I'll call this input left, we'll do input right, input up, input down, and I'll call this one input selection. Okay. For this, for left, I'm just going to do the A key. Make 4 little extras in here. This one's going to be left for the left arrow. So left. D-pad left. So if I type in D, it'll bring up D-pad and then D-pad left. And then if I type in TH for the thumbstick, looking for the left thumbstick, so left thumbstick left. Okay, so we got those. And I'm going to do that for the same here. So I'm going to go ahead and just speed through that. Take a little pause right there. So yeah, I have got the D key, the right key, the D-pad right, and then the left thumbstick right. Okay. Go ahead and add 3 keys to this one. And then down will be my S key. then this one for my action button. You can pick whatever one you want for this. I'm used to PlayStation, so X is usually the one that I use, or if you're on like an Xbox controller, then that would be like the A key, which is gamepad face button down. So if I type in face, we'll do face button bottom. Okay, so there we do. Where we have all of our buttons added. And you might be wondering, well, why do it this way? And the reason is I'm going to put these individually into the player controller, and then I'll have all the functionality on like a character, but whenever the menu opens up, it'll switch player controllers so that I'm using the inputs here and not the inputs on the character. But you are welcome to set it up any way that you like. That being said, let's jump into the actual player controller. So go ahead and open up my player controller. Go into the event graph here. Alright, so in here, what we're going to do is get access to our widget. So let's go ahead and do a, off of begin play, get all widgets of class. So get all widgets of class. The widget that I'm going to use is going to be my main menu widget here. And yeah, that's fine. Off of here, we'll do a get copy, promote this to a variable. Let's call this menu widget reference. Plug that in. Now, one thing I want to do to ensure that this gets set is put a timer on this. So there's an order of operations for how things are created whenever you start a game, and sometimes they get done out of order. If you don't know that particular order, then your player controller might spawn before the widget is created. If the player controller spawns before the widget's created, it's going to search for the widget, it won't exist, and this will be invalid. So what we want to do is do a validation check, and then if the validation check fails, there's going to be a timer that causes us to loop back and try again. So, real easy. I'm going to put the timer at the end here. So let's do a delay. It doesn't have to be a long delay. It can be, the default of 0.2. That's fine. You can make it 1 second, however long you want it. It'll just do this again in the event that it can't find the correct widget. So now that I have the variable of this, I'll just drag it in. Do a get. We'll do is valid. There you go. The one with the question mark. Just plug that in. And then off of the tick here, if it's not valid, then we want to create it. Okay. We don't need anything off the validation pin. That is fine. Just go ahead and move this out a little bit. And then if the when it gets down to here, we'll just have this loop back on itself. I'll just double click that wire. Move that real quick. There we go. Okay, so what's going to happen is it's going to run through, it's going to check. If it doesn't exist, it's going to try to do this and then get back to here. And then it's going to run a timer, and the timer is going to say, okay, after 2 seconds or 0.2 seconds, let's check again. And it's going to do this. If it's not valid, it'll try again. If it is valid, it will do nothing, and it'll just work because it'll find it at that point. Okay. The widget I'm grabbing is the 0 because we only have the 1 of that widget type. I don't need my event tick. Go ahead and just nuke that. If you want it, you can bring it up later. Let's go ahead and label this. This is just get menu widget. And then down here, we can start setting up our controls. So input up. Grab my input up under action events. I'm just going to grab each of these. So input up, left, right, and down. And then finally the action key, so input selection. Got all those. And you can order these however you like. I tend to do left, right, up, and down. So let's do left, right, up, down, and then my action key. Okay, so what we're going to do is whenever we push the button, we're going to check again if is valid, just in case. Let's say this happens and this widget's created before we get a chance to actually validate this thing, and you push a button. Well, if you push the button and it doesn't exist, you're going to get an error. So to prevent an error, we're just going to do the is valid check again, and it just won't fire at that point, and you won't get an error. So I'm going to borrow this. Control W for that. Bring that down here. I'll make some room off the first one. Most of the logic will be the same, just kind of copy and paste it here. So off of this, we'll do an is valid check, and then we want to send our input result to this widget. Okay. So to do that, we actually need to have something to talk to. You can use an event dispatcher for this, or you can create a custom event on this widget to handle all the firing, which is what I'm going to do. So I'll go back up to my widget here, and let's make a spot over here. Go ahead and right click here and do a custom event. And the reason I'm doing a custom event as opposed to an event dispatcher is I'd have to get a reference to the player controller that I'm using in order to use its dispatcher. And just to kind of avoid that extra step, I'm just going to do this. So I'm going to name this. I'll say move cursor left. Okay. I'll do this one as move cursor right. Whoops. Move cursor up. And then move cursor down. Okay, make some room for these. And what I'm going to do off of this is talk to an index that I'm going to use. So I'm going to call this, make a new variable, and I'll just call this cursor 1 underscore index. Change this to an integer type. And we don't need it to be an array, so I'll make this 1. You can make an array and have, your cursor index 1 and 2, which is fine. Go ahead and pull this in. We'll do a get. And since I'm going left, I'm just going to do a minus minus. That's going to be a decrement. So it's just going to subtract from this variable. And whatever the number of this variable is going to be the number of our button that we're choosing. Right? So 0 is button 1, 1 is button 2, and so on and so forth. The default of this is 0, so that's where it's going to start. It's going to count back. Now we don't want this to go below the current number of buttons. Now you can set up functionality that it wraps around, and I'll show both options, but for this I'm actually going to stop at the end of the cursor. So I'm going to do a branch. And for my branch condition, I'm going to do less than or equal to. So less than or equal to 0, plug it in. And if this is less than or equal to 0, I'm just going to set this to 0, so it never goes beyond that. Now, if you wanted so that it wrapped around, you would have your row length. So if your list of buttons, we'll use this as a reference. So if you had 1, 2, 3 buttons, right, and you got to the end of the list this way, so you got to button 0, if it was less than or equal to, or if you got to less than 0, it would just wrap around to button 2 or button 3 or whatever it is. So let's say I got to the end, this would be button 2, and that would just wrap it back to the other one. In my case, I just want 0, so it stays at 0. It won't go beyond it. Okay, so that should be good here. And then to go the other direction for right, I'll just go ahead and select this. Control W, move this over here. This will be going the other direction, so this is going to be a plus plus, or an increment in this case. And then we want this to be greater than or equal to. Again, if you want this to wrap, instead of doing an equal to, you just do greater than. And then you say, if you're greater than the length of this, say we have 3 variable or 3 of these. So if greater than 3, then it equals 0. It'll wrap back around the other way. In my case, I'm going to do greater than or equal to because I want to stop. So I'll do greater than or equal to. And I need to have the length of my list here. So I'm going to go ahead and grab my button list. I'll do a get, and then off of that I will do last index. And that'll be here. And then that's going to wrap back to itself. So if it's greater than or equal to the last index, then it is set to the last index and it won't go beyond that. I'll go ahead and move these out of the way. It should be good, good, good. All right, then we have our up and down. Up and down's pretty easy. We're going to go ahead and just make some space here. And let's do this. Let's grab up. Up is going to be a negative direction, so I'm going to go ahead and grab that. Copy that, come down here, I'll do a paste. Plug this in. Okay, but instead of doing a minus minus, we have to do a bit of a trick to go up and down. So if we go across linearly, so 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, we can't go down linearly. Okay, so let's say we have an array set up this way, and we're here, and we can go left and right, 0, 1, 2, 3. When we get down to here, we need to be able to get back to this point, right? So what we would do, we can't just go straight down. So if let's say I'm at 0 and I push the down key, well, 0 plus 1 does not get me to 4, right? Or if I'm on 1 and I push down, 1 plus 1, so if I do or minus minus or plus plus whatever, does not get me to 5. So what I need to do is take my current position and then add the length of my row. So if I have 4 units here, so if I'm here and I want to go down, 0 plus 4 is 4. If I want to go from 4 to 8, 4 plus 4 would be 8. If I'm at 1, 1 plus 4 would give me 5, and so on. So that's what we're going to do to go up and down. So coming in here, I grab this. This is going to be going upward, which is going to be a negative, so minus integer. And I want to set my cursor, so I'll drag my cursor in, drop it in here, and make more room here. The end result of that is here. And then what I'm going to be adding to it will be my row length. So I'm going to come over here, make a new variable, do button row length. And this is arbitrary. However many buttons you're going to have, just make sure you give it in a row length here. So for my case, I'll make a row length of 2. So if it's a 4 by 4, that's 1, or it's 2 by 2. So I'm going to make 2. And put that here. This is going to get that. And then this is going to get the result. So, and then for my cursor, if it's ever less than 0, it's going to be back at 0, so nothing fancy there. To go the other way, we'll just copy and paste this. Coming down. This is going to be adding, so let's go ahead and drag in. We'll do plus. And it doesn't matter which direction you add from, so just go ahead and make it a little bit cleaner. Plug this one in. And if this is ever greater than the row length, we want it to stop at the row length. So I'm going to make this greater than or equal to. Again, if you want it to wrap, you can just say go back to 0 if it's greater than the max row length. But if I'm greater than my row length here, I want this to be the row length. Plug that in. Wonderful spaghetti code. Okay. To see if this works, we need to do a couple of things. First, we need to get these, the information from our player controller to make these work. So let's go into the player controller. And then from here, I'm just going to steal my widget off of him. Let's just do the left. So move cursor left. Plug that in. For the right, this is going to be move cursor right, so let's go ahead and copy this. And I'll do the same for up and down. Okay, so that should be good enough. We'll go ahead and compile and save. I'll do a quick save all. And if we go back into our widget, because we actually, if I hit play from here, we don't have the other two boxes to test. So it'll be easier if we add those. Let's go back to our widget here. Design view. Okay, add in two more. So the easiest way to do that, since I'm using a vertical box, is to wrap this with a horizontal box. You can do it either way. If you do the vertical box with a horizontal box, it'll be this way, and your numbers will be different. So really the orientation of your numbers kind of matter. So since I want to go from, if I look at my array setup here, if I want to go 0 linear, so 0, 1, 2, horizontal with my rows, then I want to set my array up that way. If you want to go vertical, then the way it's going to count will be vertical. It'll go down before it goes across. Okay. So I'm going to go to my size box here. I'm just going to right click, come down to wrap with, and do a horizontal box. And then in my horizontal box, I'm going to take this other scroll box and just add it to my horizontal box. Doesn't look like much happened, but now it is done this way. Go ahead and collapse those down. I'm going to take my horizontal box, right click, do a duplicate. So now I have all these. Go ahead and expand them out just to make sure. So 0. Open that overlay. So 1, open this one, and open this one. Now we will do this dynamically later where we don't have to actually set this up. We'll have it auto-populate this, but we'll save that for a different tutorial because that's going to take some time as well. Let's go ahead and rename these. So highlight 0, this one, so we have 1, so this should be 2, and this should be 3. So 2. Compile it, save it. we need to add those to our list. So let's go back into our graph here, jump over, make some space, and then just add them to our array. So add some pins to both of these. And I'll add in button 2 and button 3. Highlight 2. And highlight 3. Compile it, save it. And now if we play, first I have to establish my focus, so I'll just go ahead and click 1. And if I use my arrow keys, up, down, left, and right work. If I use WASD, nothing's happening, right? Let's check if I use the controller. If I use the controller, left, right, up, and down are working. The joypad are working. So we have the WASDs not working, but there's actually a reason why it's not working. So the issue that we're having is that our WASD keys, or WASD keys, are not using the internal navigation system for the widget, unlike the arrow keys or the controller. So to get those going, we want to make sure that the thing that that has focus is what's getting focus. So right now it's saying, hey, does this have focus, true or false? Do this. But we're not actually setting the focus anywhere. So what we're going to do is come back here, right off of our next sequence. We are going to check to see if we have focus, and if so, make sure we set it. Do a branch, and we want to grab our button list here. We'll do a get copy. We're going to use our cursor index for the value here. And then off of this, we want to check to see if it has focus. So we'll do, again, has keyboard focus. If it does not have focus, then plug that in. If it doesn't have focus, we're just going to give it focus. So drag that off. We'll say set keyboard focus. And off of false, we'll plug that in. However you want to organize this, it's up to you. So if we don't have focus, we are going to make sure that we get it. So I'll save it. And now if we jump back in, you'll see that we actually start with it already highlighted. And if I click off, I don't lose the focus anymore. And WASD work. Although it looks like my down key from this position is doing bad math. So let me go fix that. Let's go over my down key. And down, down, down. We are adding. I should actually be checking to see if it's greater than these two added together. So let's go ahead and set that in here. So if my cursor index is greater than the result of these two, then it should be equal to those. And now we have WASD working. And that works, up, down, left, right. That's good. But you'll notice that the D-pad and the arrow keys all of a sudden suddenly don't work. And the reason for that is we actually have two systems in conflict with each other. So we have an internal navigation system that utilizes the arrow keys and the D-pad, but the system that we just set up over here is supposed to be controlling the WASD setup. So what we end up having going on here is this is changing the cursor index value. Okay? And if we come over here, we have this set keyboard focus, but this thing is only actually firing whenever the current index does not have focus, right? So if we move the D-pad over, it says, okay, it updates the value, it checks the value, does that value have focus? Yes or no? If not, set it, right? But we have nothing to really govern that for the arrow keys. And the reason for that is it's using the internal navigation system to jump between the buttons. But it's okay, we can get around that. Let's go ahead and go to our for loop here. And with the setup, after the loop is done and it checks if something has focus, we're going to capture whatever that focus is. So I'm going to grab my index here. Let's go ahead and put this after true. So if it has focus, awesome. Let's just go ahead and capture what that is. We'll just pass that in. You might think, well, that's kind of redundant, but check this out. So now that we've done that, hit compile, go ahead and play it. The arrow keys now work. Ooh. But look, now our WASD keys no longer work. Like I said, we have two systems fighting. Well, we could turn the other system off, but we'll get to that in the next one. For this, we're going to do a little bit of a workaround, and it'll get you happy for the day. So let's go ahead and move on to the next part. So now that we're setting this, what's happening is we run through the loop, it checks the array element, it sets the value, does this, right? And then, since this has been updated from here, whenever this fires on the next sequence, it checks what it is. If it's false, it sets it, right? All well and good. But now, because this is always being set after the loop, that means that this is always going to be whatever this is. So our system over here that is changing the value manually will never take priority, because as we're trying to set the value here, the loop on this end is always setting what's currently being passed in. Not that big of a deal. We just want to make sure that we also tell our key bindings, or our little functions here, to update the cursor position and set the focus. We could do that here, but we already have the logic over there, so let's just go ahead and make a new event here. So I'm going to jump back this way, do a custom event. Let's call this update cursor position. Run that there. Come back to our buttons, and we'll just need to call that. So update cursor position. And we want this to happen regardless of whether this is true or false, so we'll just pass the false in as well. Okay. Now if you want this to be nice and pretty, you can do this for each one of these, or you can just pass in everybody to the same one. It doesn't matter which method you choose. It all gets you to the same spot. So go ahead and just make this pretty. Okay, so that should work for both. So now that we have, every time we push a key, it should update and say, hey, just go ahead and set our position. And this one says, hey, whenever you loop through and check, also capture that. So that will work for both the internal navigation and our individual keys. So here we go with our WASD, that works. Arrow keys also work. The joypad works, and the D-pad works. Awesome. And if you hit spacebar, enter, or your gamepad face button bottom, or your A button or X button, whatever that button was, you'll see that also triggers. Now you'll see that spacebar and enter trigger, even though we didn't set them up, because that's part of the internal navigation system, which we will disable at some point. However, if you are happy with your system and you only need one player to access this, this is fine, because you have mouse input, you've got the keyboard input, and you have the gamepad input. And you can actually use this stuff right away. So let's go ahead and set up with our buttons. It's just yelling because of our array count here. Let's go ahead and set up our buttons. So I'm going to go down to, where are our buttons? So button 0. I was going to do this on, so you have the choice, you can do this on clicked, pressed, or released. It doesn't really matter. For the aesthetic of the button, so when you push the joypad button down, you'll get to see it push down and release. I would just do it on released. If you want it to be a clicked event, do a clicked event. But for these, it's going to be released. So I'll get these in here. I'll grab all 4 of them. Released and released. Now these I'm going to have them all do the same thing, so I'm just going to move these together. And all I'm going to do is pass these into a switch on int. So switch on int. I'll just make 4 pins here. I don't need my output or my default pin, so I'll get rid of that. I'm going to use the button index, or my cursor index, for my value here, for my selection. I'll just go ahead and plug these in, because it really doesn't matter which one of these buttons is being pressed, because the actual thing driving the button is going to be whatever the current index is. So it doesn't matter who goes in, it matters who comes out. So, and then for that, we're just going to draw some text to the screen, and that'll be our output for this particular demonstration. So let's grab a text. I'll throw it in here. And then I'll just call this selection value. Sure. Selection value text. And I'll hit make sure it's a variable. Come back in, we'll grab that, drag it in. We'll use our set text value. Let's drag this off. We'll do set text. And we'll use the bottom one here, this set text with the text in parentheses. Grab 4 of those. Plug these in. Ah, come here, you. Okay, and I was going to hard code some values here. We're going to change this later, so don't worry about it. Again, just proof of concept, so you guys can do what you want with it. So for the first value, I'll say, we'll call this one apple, right? Whatever thing you're selecting is what's going to pop up. I'll do this one as banana. This one will be cherry. Again, up to you. And strawberry. Okay. And if I click it, we get the right one. If I use spacebar, we get the right one. And it doesn't matter if my selection is over, one or the other. Okay. So that's going to wrap it up for this tutorial. In the next one, or the next few, I should say, we're going to look at how to make this more robust, how to have it more dynamic, so you don't have to do all these together. So we'll create a system to where it figures out what button we have, and just we don't have to actually plug in all 4. It'll generate the button for us, which will be cool. So that's coming up, and also how to do 2 controllers using the same widget. So if you guys are going to do like a character select screen and you want to have a local setup, you already know how much of a pain in the butt that is. So we'll do it to where you can have 2 different cursors using 2 different controllers, and you can select whatever you like. Okay, and that will be coming up. Keep your eye out and stay tuned. I shall see you in the next one. Hey guys, we have done it. We're at 1,000 subscribers, and I have you to thank for it. Thank you, awesome. Misty and I both appreciate it. Maybe I should have called the studio Fuzzy Kitty Productions. That being said, of course, I want to remind you that we are taking a vote for what project I should work on next. Big kind of project for the channel, whether it's going to be a fighting game or puzzle adventure or whatever. Check it out in the link in the description on the Patreon. Head over there; it's free. Just vote on it. Also, I want to give a quick shout out to Gaurav Barari. Hopefully I'm pronouncing that correctly. Gaurav decided to make a wonderful logo. as a way of saying thank you for all the work that I do, which is very, very appreciated. Here it is. I think it's beautiful. I love how the beak is the L and the D is the head, and lame duck just kind of pops out, and studio takes a back seat. It makes the cartoony logo a little bit more mature, which is kind of cool. So again, Gaurav, thank you very much. That was very awesome, and stay tuned, keep watching, and I shall see you in the next one.